introduction. You will have, as usual, the live chat on the right side of your YouTube window. Please type in your questions and we will be more than happy to answer them. This is the EAO live chat and we're more than happy to entertain you tonight. Tonight, it's an enormous pleasure to host this show together with my friend, Professor Nelson Silva from Brazil. I would say the only country which is a little better in soccer than the Germans are. Sorry, Nelson, I had to say that. Nelson is a true friend. We spent years together in New York. He's a full professor at the University in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. He holds multiple doctorates and postdoctorates from Sao Paulo, from New York University, served for 11 years at the New York University, where we actually met and became friends. He's a true expert when it comes to fully edentulous cases. And actually always when I sit in front of fully edentulous cases, always his name comes up to me and said, what would Nelson do with this case? Nelson, hello to Brazil. How's the weather in Brazil? How's life in Brazil? And welcome to that show.
Stefan, good to see you as always. Yes, we had a good time in New York City. And well, we are about to start the summer. And the summer in Brazil, it's quite really hot, I would say. Not warm, it's really hot. Things are doing okay. I'm in my office now, connecting to you guys. I have my faculty appointment. We're gonna talk during the presentation, but it's a pleasure to come to EAO, especially having you as the host. I'm honored to be part of this show, and I hope to give people a message on particularly edentulous patients, what can be done and how we can move that to the implant therapy. So thanks, Stefan, and the EAO.
Perfect, Nelson. Thanks for being here. So I think the people, they don't want us to talk about each other and talk about football and our private things. Let's go right into the topic. We have the topic of the fully edentulous patient today. So meaning a patient has sort of a failing dentition. He sits in front of you. He's been thinking about his problems with the dentition maybe for a very, very long time. And now he took the step to go into your office and now he sits in front of you. And you know what? A case came across me last week and I thought I'm going to share that with Nelson and to open the discussion a little bit, because that would probably be your case. She's a lady in her mid-60s. And if probably you see it now, and all of you guys all around the world, you also see that case. We have multiple problems. We have perio problems. We have decay. I think we are all clear. It's a failing dentition. And you see the smile line on the upper right. You see the occlusal view on the lower left. And well, I took a CAT scan and I did some planning. Of course, it's not enough for diagnosis, but that's the patient we've been talking about today, right? So Nelson, this just as an introduction for you, and we will change this format a little bit. We will have a little bit more content, and that's why I want to have Nelson present your topic and present the steps you would take. So let's go back to this patient. Sits in front of me. So which steps should I take, Nelson? And all of you in the community, please ask your questions also during the presentation of Nelson, and we will address all of them. Please, Nelson, what should I do with that lady?
Yes, Stefan, this is a challenge, and I would say that the treatment planning has it's location dependent, depends on finances. And one thing that I have learned is we need to accommodate finances for people's expectation. And failing dentition can be in different levels. Your patient could be a patient with financial means. Maybe if she loses all the teeth, you can plan immediate implant placement using, we have click guides, we have star concepts. If the teeth the patient has they are good enough, and the treatment planning can allow us. But what I've been seeing sometimes is the need of doing steps. First steps would be a complete denture, and then you move to the next treatment plan. And even if the patient is a completely edentulous patient that comes with a terminal dentition, no teeth, I've seen people trying to place implants without a good and decent complete denture. And with all this technology we have now, dentures is an excellent guide for aesthetics, excellent guide for the best implant position. And I think that's the message I want to give to people. So you have different ways to approach. You have financial conditions, and I will try to give my perception, particularly on the completely denture side, and how this can help people on optimizing it and make a new denture, for instance, something attractive, what we call sexy dentures, meaning makes you feeling good in developing a nice complete denture. Because we have, most of us, we struggle on the edentulous patient to, for instance, redo a complete denture. Not everybody is really into it. So, but now with the digital technology,
I maybe immediately give you one just quick question in the beginning. So, is that how final is that denture for you? I mean, is that a 99% final from an aesthetic perspective and also from occlusal perspective, or how many readjustments will you do?
That's great. Yeah, we consider that dentures being done as a final denture, a really final. If the patient moves for the implant therapy in the next step, I have an excellent aesthetic. I know the best positioning of the implant, and I have also already the bite registration, the vertical dimension, all defined in this very fine denture. What happened now is all these steps before implant therapy, sometimes people don't like because of many consultation would come. But with the technology that we have nowadays, and here I'm in milling technology and the 3D printing technology, things becomes affordable that one could first do a complete denture on a terminal dentition patient and then move to the next step. Depends on the financial means. So for instance, in my country, this works well because you need to give people time that they can accommodate financially for the steps to come. Yeah. So in this way, I strongly believe, not only myself, but several people, that if you can develop a good denture for the patient, not only will have the aesthetic of the patient, but also will allow me to a better sit of the denture when a CBCT is done, in a way that the CBCT is taken properly. And then if I go for guided, the guide will be perfect or very accurate. I wouldn't say perfect. Perfect is not easy to get, but very accurate. And then you can make a predictable surgical guide and surgery at the end. So pretty much that's how we deal with that. So we believe on the final denture as a final, and then you move to the next step. So what you see here is a book that will come from Quintessence now in 2024 with Eric Kuchka in Canada. In fact, I'm coming to Canada to see him. And this sequence of developing complete denture, everyone who is watching us can scan this code, you go for the JPD, and you can free download the 55-minute video that goes on the step-by-step of doing the dentures in the way that we believe things can be done, optimized, and help people on that. So just an example on how the videos were performed. We use a green screen on the back, and then the full video is done in that way, step-by-step from the treatment planning until the end. And this patient you see has a failed dentition. We extracted immediate denture and then a final definitive denture. A little bit of that I will show in my presentation. So I have a conflict of interest, and I like to disclose that. I think I have a 3-shape agreement. A Cine Implant is a company in Brazil. Ivocar and SprintRay are the ones that I have some funds. But regardless what the type of material you have, scanner you have, what means to us is to show the concept and the idea, and that's what I'm here for. So denture is being treated like that you guys are watching. You just drop inside a container with water. So we foresee that we can do differently. We can do dentures in the way that all these patients you were saying, this is dentures being done in different ways. Printed, milled, different people, different ages. And that's what I believe. I believe that you can customize it. And even for young patients, such as this lady, this is the first case I have seen being treated when I learned all this process with Eric, who is now my partner on the book. And I strongly believe that we can do much more than pushing implants sometimes if the financial means is not available. And then you have a lady like this one, you transform the life. This is a full denture. This patient now has a hybrid. So having said that, most of the patients, when we have complete dentures being done in the past, we have a noticeable denture. What we try to do is to make a definitive denture. And then that denture will be my guide for the hybrid. You will see that in a little bit. So that's the question that I always pose. What dentures has to your work? Everything. It's absolutely everything. So this is what we see people coming to offices. I don't know around the globe how this dentistry is being done. Patient come to your office already with markers for implant therapy, and the denture is not adequate. So based on your question, Stefan, yeah, I should do a good denture before. I come from a pros training and implant training in a way that the pros drives the implant placement. So in our world now that everything is speedy, everybody wants to be very speedy. Things like this I see very often, and I don't agree. But these two guys, they are key for what I'm going to be showing to you, because we use them as our starting point to develop a decent full denture, either definitive, as Stefan mentioned, or for your implant therapy using the double CT scan therapy. And this is really a key and important, because papers, I'm not going to go over papers. This is for everybody who wants to take a look, that we must ensure that the full denture for a double CBCT, if you're going for implant therapy, must sit properly. And then you take your CBCT with the markers in a closed mouth. Here is an example on the right side. You can see the yellow line on the right side is the denture that was manually adapted to the tissue. And then a little lower, and you see this white line, which the denture of the patient has a metal frame under, embedded it. So I like automation of softwares. In this way, when you don't have a decent denture and it's not well adapted, you ended up in having problems on the surgical guide design. On contrary, if you see this one is the decent denture done, it immediately adapts to the tissue. So you have a perfect seat or very accurate seat of the denture, and then your surgical guide will be done adequately. Here is a more expanded, that you see the gray scale of the denture nicely adapted over the tissue without black spots. Maybe except on the retromolar pad area on the lower, you can see a little bit of that, and I know where that fail came from. And in fact, but this is what helps us big time on the surgical guide. That's why we believe if you go for a full dentation patient and then you go for implant therapy, the full denture must be done properly. Not only for the fit, but also for the aesthetics. And then it will help you to place the implants on the right position. So why people don't do it frequently? And then, Stefan, I would like your comment on that, on your German side, how this has been treated, because maybe I'm showing things that I only see in my country, but I believe this is all over. Patient with non-adequate denture, then the professional moves straight forward for the implant therapy. But people hesitated, and I have checked some of information about that, hesitated to do a new denture because maybe it's not that easy to do. Maybe cost, you're going to add up more cost for the treatment planning. Maybe lack of knowledge of the digital environment we are nowadays. And redoing denture sometimes could be boring. I mean, if you need to redo it again, if you do wax rims and so on and so on, some people are not really into it. At least that's what I have seen even in the teaching environment. So we know nowadays that these excuses don't work anymore. So you have digital approach, and now you have the 3D printing, which can be done as a temporary and much cheaper if you go for milling, for example. And not only that, it's exciting. It's engaging when you work on the technology. So here is an example of a 3D printed denture, because everybody says that, oh, wow, but the 3D printed denture is not nice enough, even if for a short period of time, maybe 6 months, 8 months, maybe a healing or something like this. So this is a 3D printing that was done using this denture base and the teeth from a sprint ray. Has a certain translucency. We know that there is a Lucitone available. We have other products, but I like this one particularly. And this is the denture in the patient's mouth. And this is the patient that you guys all have seen in the beginning of my presentation in one of that patients. This is a decent work. Well, in fact, it's a very nicely done work. So understand that I always have this statement, live, laugh, and 3D print, because the more I 3D print, more I'm learning as Stefan, and more I'm becoming confident of doing things in the way I will be showing to you guys. I am not saying that this is a final end of the road, not at all. But as an educator, and I believe on development, industry is moving very fast. So I'm going to show to you how this is done and what is needed.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please,
go. I mean, you often have the problem of, we said, like a failing dentition, meaning you need to extract teeth and then bring in an interims, whatever, restoration, which may cause problem because you have to reline it, it may not fit because these are major wounds, periopation with apical abscess, there may be a huge change in tissue. Can you give us a quick comment on that? How do you approach that? Is that a second interims? What you're doing then?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It is. So the first time, of course, when you print and you go for the surgery, you all know that relining needs to be done. We all know that. So relining, you can use adhesive that you can combine resin for 3D printing to PMMA. So this is things that can be done in the way usually it's done. But nowadays, we see companies already with products that's even in Brazil, there is one that they call rebase. It's a resin for printed work being rebased, which is the same chemistry. So now your question is, when you have a terminal dentition, you extract. So the way that we approach, and I will show a little bit of that on these 20 minutes we have, is we get a patient, take photos, we smile design the patient, and then we go for the whole process of the digital until you have the interim. And interesting, your question is the case I will show that we do the new denture. We fail on the aesthetics because we have a more bulky material, is more open. And then, of course, you need a second pair of dentures for the aesthetic later on. But you print it, you 3D print it. So my point is, in the past, milling becomes expensive, but now 3D printing, even if you print 2 interims, we're okay on the financial standpoint.
Yeah, get your point.
I don't know if I have answered your question, but I think
totally
it's a balance of, okay, does that make sense financially? Yeah, it does. Nowadays, it didn't in the past, but I think now we have yeah. So, and then what you see is pretty much what you need. You know, a scanner, photograph, this is key, either on a smartphone. You have some, vertical dimension components. Also, you can have a fork for Frankfurt and Kemper analysis, and also transfer it to the software. It depends how we are doing. We're not using those anymore. We are just using mainly photographs and aligning patient with photographs and overlaying scans. And you have the laboratory. In my case, I have a laboratory in my own office, which I am the one who design and do the process. I decide to do that. may not make sense financially for several people, but it does for me. That's why I have the opportunity to be sharing that with you. And one thing that I will upfront tell people that there is no fully digital process. It's always a mix. We have gone for trying fully digitally, scanning intraorally, for instance, edentulous patient. And we came up saying that it doesn't really work well on the optimization side. And full denture and impression and good accommodator for denture is a dynamic process when you are capturing what is inside the mouth. So then what we call, and Michael Scherer was giving us a chapter about it, it's called Digilog, digital and analog combined. I think that's the main answer I would like to leave for the people watching us. So the protocol is simple. You have a denture. Let's put in the perception that 85%, almost 90% of patients have existing dentures. So you use that as your starting point. Then you do a smile design. You check the vertical dimension at first step. Then you go for the impression that you take using that denture. You CAD design it, and then you fabricate it. So that's how we do this. That's how we manage this. Existing denture, and then you have a smile design. You scan the denture, then you get the vertical dimension, and you move that process forward from the fabrication, which is a CAD and CAM milled or printed. So how does this work? Of course, you need the data acquisition and manufacturing. Let's go for the data acquisition. In my case, I have 3Shape, which allows us to select what you want to do. If you want to scan intraorally, if you want to do impression, or a 360 in existing denture. And that could be, for instance, an occlusal rim on a base. So it depends on what you're really approaching the case, if the patient has no denture, for instance. So you have different approaches. And why this is important? Because for each one of these, you select each route you decide to go, you're going to have algorithms designed for a specific of each of those three: intraoral scanning, impression, or a 360 denture being scanned. So intraoral, we know that is possible. We have done that. We don't do that anymore, especially lowers, because you need some retraction. So we need retractors. I treat elderly patients, and sometimes it's not that simple to come with a scanner inside their mouth. So we decided to really move forward and not use intraoral scanning, because it works, could work for some cases, but the majority of the people, more optimization you gain if you can take an impression or use an existing denture as your tray for the impression being taken. And that's what's called the reference denture technique, or cup denture. And this is not new, Stefan. We know this is not new. This is done in 1958. But what that makes it attractive, that's now with all these concepts, since 1958, now you can make it digitized and your life changes. So you don't need all these lab steps, wax, and then you duplicate differently. So the cup denture technique, it's a very straightforward process. The way it works is you get existing denture or occlusal rim on a base, and you scan it on the entire surface of both upper and lower, and then you scan outside, and you take the bite registration using those references. That's pretty much how it is. You can also have the 360, and we don't do 360 because the mesh that is formed, the algorithms, it's a little bit confusing, can work sometimes, but it's in our case, I think it's a waste of time trying to get a 360 of a denture, and then we go straight for the cup denture or the reference denture technique. So the manufacturing is a decision that one would make. Of course, that involves cost. And I would say that coming from the pink-based teeth printed as an interim, or even a mono block, A1 or A2, then can be easily stained on the gingiva also is a way to do. It depends on the work you're doing and the philosophy and who is your lab and costs involved, but you have different ways to do. And we have the milled dentures using a single puck, such as iVotion, which is a dual shaded puck that you place in a machine and the machine gives you the denture, or you can have in a two-piece base being milled, teeth being milled, and so on. So what's the best? Well, difficult to say at this point. 3 years ago, I would say milling it would be the best. But now we know that that's not the reality, because the printing materials are moving very, very good, fast forward, not as a definitive, oh yes, sometimes as a definitive that some marketing are using as a definitive 3D printed good materials, and clinical trials and follow-ups are on the way. But you know what? It's difficult at this point to really say you should do that or you should do that one. If you were, of course, using as an interim and not as a definitive, I would go for printing for the financial standpoint. If something breaks, you can just replace it easily and less costly. So here's an example of 2014 milled denture I did with Avadent, my first one. And then in 2021, the same case I changed, and this is done using the iVotion, single block. Not a single polishing was done. This is just coming out of the machine. I removed the spools. Here, this one is a 3D printed with some finishing and texturing over. And here is the one at the beginning, which is a 3D printed using a high impact denture, modern. And this one, you can see that one can get a good work done. Quite frankly, this patient has a milled denture on the right side, on the left side of all of you, facing it, and the right side is the 3D printed. That is different. Well, maybe a little bit, but you know what? It doesn't make any a change in his life if he uses one in another from the aesthetic standpoint. We can talk about biomechanics, maybe that's the question. So let's see terminal dentation. This patient is a terminal dentation, similar to what Stefan has showed us. And then extractions were made and he got immediate denture. And one thing, Stefan, in this case particularly that you can see is the aesthetic was not good. The fit could be okay realigned, but the aesthetic was not good. What you do, you use that one as your reference denture, and then you just fix the aesthetic. Bingo. Very simple. So digital concept once again. Here you can either use the denture of the patient for the impression, or you can have a secondary printed one. You will need one for the CBCT if you are planning to have an implant later on. So why not? If you have that one on the left side milled, why not printing one that is cheaper and have that ready and use that one as your tray for impression and use the reference denture technique. It's an impression technique that you all know, except that you're using, instead of a tray, you're using a denture. Here, as we take the impression, take the bite. I'm not discussing about occlusion here. I think that's not my first intention. And then you scan it using your handheld scanner. Can be done with a bench scanner, sure it can. So then you move forward for the printing for aesthetic reason. I need to give the patient a try-in to see if he likes it. And he changed big time. From one end to the other one, you see that the only thing was done was moving the upper as a crossbite inside. And then you get the side of the denture in a much better aesthetic positioning. And the patient approved, and you have the patient with the denture done. So you can mill it out. We did mill it out using iVotion. Could be 3D printed? Yes, it could. We did an iVotion just for academic purposes, that you see the texture that comes out from the machine. You can texturize even more the patient the way it came, and then with the denture. So look how this change in terms of treatment planning, implant placement. I know we can design it, but if you have the denture instead of the teeth, you will for sure change where the implants will be positioned when you have your software. So I think it's a big advantage on doing that before you extract and move things completely forward. This when it's possible. So you use the digital impact. Now it's very simple. You have good fit on the denture, static. You see the crossbite, Stefan, the crossbite on the upper. That's why we gained the static. It was just moving a little bit, and that's it. So it's not that many hours of software to be done. So you get the markers, you go for the double CBCT. Now it's a piece of cake because the software aligns automatically. Then you come with your treatment planning for the implant. You get different options on surgical designs. You can have a two-piece that you connect and patient bites down. I'm in favor of having surgical guides in occlusion to be positioned. It depends. So you have different options. I can explore that if a question comes up. This is the way it's done. This or the lower we did with the two pieces that you connect, and then you just take out the top. Then you have this one which you position. It's a little tricky on this one. Sometimes the two parts don't fit well. I would change that on the next one. But it's a way that you can better position, or at least the closest one would see. And then you go for the surgery. I'm not here to show if it's a key-driven or keyless. It depends on the philosophy, it depends on the implant, and depends on the support one would have in their region. That's why sometimes key-driven and keyless literature, it's controversial. That is no better or worse. So I leave people free to decide. Then you have the lower. In my case, I made a change, hand change on the existing denture for a hybrid. I could have printed that, Stefan. I could have printed that. So I did that some years ago. I could just have printed, because this takes me an hour and a half of work on your chair side. And everybody who does that knows how sometimes this is labor intensive. So you go for using it. This is a smile lock. First time I use a smile lock that you just click on top. We can discuss that another time if EAO is interested. If that is good or not, it's my first experience. I felt could be a good option, but sometimes could have a little confusion on the process. Here is how it was done. Here is the end. Well, implants could be placed differently, yes. Would I have spread it differently? Yes. Would I have maybe another one on the left side on the upper? Yeah, I could have. But anyways, that's the decision I made. Here is the two dentures hand changed after the surgery. And now it's time that I need to go for a bite registration when the healing of the implants are achieved. We go for a bite registration because I have the vertical dimension already defined. So in the way the bite registration is done, you can just place the scan bodies and then you scan it. And I use that as a very conventional prosthodontic training. And people ask me why I did it this way. Again, I could have printed all these pieces separately. Yes, I could. But why I did in this way? Because even I know that I can have markers on the tissue, and then you can manually align. I like the software when you scan to align it properly. So having a rigid bite in one side, keeping the vertical dimension for the other side that I can scan, is for me what works and make the whole process accurate. I don't have papers to prove that, but this is old work on the prosthodontics. So you're just showing that you can have, anatomical landmarks that you can select and align it. But anyways, I like those rigids. So then you get all this data. In this case, hybrids, Stefan, I sent to a lab because although I can design, but hybrids takes really long time for the development until it's finished. So I send all this information to the lab. Then we decide together how we go with a fully monolithic. We know industry is going for a full monolithic, maybe a very thin layer on the front of the aesthetic zone. But that's where the industry is going to. Fully monolithic. In my case, I tried the full monolithic, but because in the way that implants were placed, and that's my mistake when I made the design back then for the implant positioning, I ended up in needs to have a frame and crowns on top, because the machine here that we had could not go for the angulations and have a fully monolithic, and then it would compromise the aesthetic. We decided to have crowns on top of frame. Not the best approach, but it was my mistake, and we learned from our mistake. I could have designed differently back then. So here is the example of the design. And of course, when you do it this way, we 3D print just to see if the fit looks okay, because aesthetically, you know that you're very already close to what you're looking for. This is a tough material that, so now there is an onyx stuff they claim, the company's claiming that you can use as a definitive. This is just a temporary that I placed to check if the patient would like it, but more than that, if the fit of the components are okay. So then we go for the final design, and you decide, in our case, to have a frame And here is the hybrid that was designed, and you have Emax on top. Using the Smile Lock, there is no screw holes, as you can see. You just click, and this is the intraoral picture. Here is the upper, the way that was finished. An X-ray of the work developed. Here is the patient. And I have the patient with the denture and the patient with the hybrid. Do you see differences? Yes, we do. Why? Because a full denture process is different than a zirconia process. A full denture being 3D printed, for instance, is different than if you were milling, for instance, a zirconia and crown. So we see differences. But what is important is you have a guidance. And when you decide to change, you know what you're changing. You're not changing something out of the blue. You know why you are making certain modifications and changes. So that's why I strongly believe that full arch must be done if a dentulous patient comes nicely. Using the reference denture, which I showed, the patient comes with the denture, thumbs up, use it, even if it's all broken. And keep in mind that the digital and analog must be side by side. Printed or milled. I don't have that answer now because I've been printing, Stefan. I've been printing, and I've been more and more confident. I know the issues. I know could be an overstatement and pushing too much, but I'm been printing and I'm getting more and more expertise and confidence. And guided strategy is a professional preference. If a keyless or if you have a key-driven approach, it's really up to you. If one picture that would summarize what the Digilog is about is this: existing denture. You start from using that existing denture, try to do some smile design, get an interim, place in the patient, and then you move to have the full denture. In this case, this patient got 2 full dentures because he lived far away from my office, and he asked, listen, can I have 2 identical? Yeah, sure, I can. And beautiful on this is as we have the file, and the file can be, again, reused in the future. So I think this is the message I have. Terminal dentition is an important topic. We all feel that edentulous patient is growing more than we expect. We had that fluorides in the water, and that would reduce people for being edentulous in the elderly. It's not what's happening. So having the opportunity to offer full denture or an implant or a combination of both, I think it's what we should have in our offices. And I hope to have given to people a little insight of how I believe things could be done for terminal dentition, especially edentulous people.
Nelson, thank you so much. That was a beautiful and a great presentation. And I think you have such a great lesson for us. It's not always immediate. It's not always on the same day. In particular, and I've been doing that for more than 20 years now, I still find it so difficult to do everything on one shot, to do perfect prosthetics, to do perfect implants, to do perfect augmentation, everything on one shot. So why don't you split things up exactly like you told us?
Yeah.
So thank you.
That's the message. Go slowly. See
I understood the message.
Possible.
Very good. Nelson,
I'm open for questions, comments, critiques. I'm very open.
Please type in your question. I think it's a great topic. I have maybe one opening question for you. I don't see any big question. There's one question from Victor coming in. I will ask this one immediately. I just have one question, more from a general basis. Is there any way you would go without a denture, meaning you have a case, maybe let's say it's a decay case, you have bone without end. I mean, maybe the vertical distance is fine, the aesthetics is fine. Would you go for an immediate implant case and maybe go for an immediate loading at the same time? Is that an option you would go, or would you always go this way?
No. I would go for immediate implant placement. I would. I have no restriction. what I have seen is when we have a collapsed bite, even doing smile design, which I'm big favor of people learning how to do smile design, we see that we don't get immediately the right position of the teeth after the immediate loading. As you mentioned, if you have references,
okay, so I think we have a problem with Nelson now with his connection. Maybe type in your questions and let's see if he reconnects, and we try to get in some comments and try to get in some questions, and we will try to rearrange his connection. So any more questions from the audience? We have Victor already having a question on what is the impact of a single implant versus 2 implant mandible retained over dentures on retention in edentulous patient. We'll ask this question, of course, to Nelson if he comes back. We'll work on that. Just maybe if I could summarize sort of his presentation to wait for Nelson coming back. For me, I think he had a very, very good point. And the point is, if you see a case which has maybe lost his vertical distance, if you see a case which maybe has a problem in aesthetics, and you will have to control all these things, you have to control the aesthetics, you have to control the vertical distance, you have to control implants, you have to control augmentation. It's maybe better in some of these cases to sort of make a denture beforehand, to win some time, to adjust everything for your implant later on. And I think that was a very, very valid comment. And before his connection froze, I asked him if he goes for immediate implant in some cases, and he said, yeah, maybe if everything is fine, everything is perfect, if the vertical distance is fine, if the aesthetics are fine, then he would also go for immediate implant placement. And I think that is a very, very important message. And I would say if maybe we ask the technical support if they see that he's coming back. Nelson, you're back here.
Well, there was a power shortage here, so everything like collapsed, and then
Wonderful.
I came back.
I tried to take over as a surgeon in a prosto topic. I hope I managed, but I'm very happy you're back. So again, we were at this question when you froze. Is there a situation where you would go all in? You remember my question, right?
Yeah.
Don't go via denture. I think we lost you during that answer. Maybe you can come back to that.
Well, it's just
if everything is perfect, you would go in this direction. This is
I would go for immediate loading. Of course, vertical dimension. We have several cases like this. It's a collapsed periodontal disease all over, but you have vertical dimension and so on. What makes my reference is the central. This is the key guy for any more position, the width, the height, and where the central is. If the central is too collapsed, it's really off, chances are that you go for the first shot on your immediate loading and it's not gonna come aesthetically good, and then you need to redo it again. So maybe if you do an interim denture, and then could be a way to go. Or
Nelson, sorry to interrupt you, but this could happen with your denture too, right? How do you
it could
readjust for that?
Well, it's for my understanding, you can have the implants plates. Maybe you don't do immediate loading. You have the denture, and then it's easier for you to redo a denture than you have to redo a hybrid. So that's my perception. So if I have an easy way to remake things, and again, thinking on the financial standpoint, I know it depends on where you are on the patient. But in the case that you don't have a patient with a financial constraint. So I would go first for denture, then another one, but I would place the implants. I mean, at least you were close, okay? But maybe it's not an easy answer because it depends on the alignment of teeth you have, especially for the aesthetic standpoint. So the aesthetic of that is, for me, is a key. How good that looks, and then you can position an implant later on. Okay, now so I'm very close, and then let me place the implants, and then I can do it as when the patient is happy. So it depends. Redoing a denture for me, it's simpler than doing a hybrid. That's my perception. I could be wrong, and I'm okay if people could reply.
There's a question from Victor, a little more from a prosthetic perspective and also more concept-wise. Would you also go for a single implant? I mean, we've heard that concept, like one single implant in the middle area of the lower mandible, or would you rather go for two implant mandibular retained overdentures? So maybe a little concept-wise, I think this is also interesting for all of us. I mean, how do you approach these cases? I mean, let's be honest, these are all most of the perio cases, and peri-implantitis might be a problem. So you rather go for less implants and have them then removable, or what is your principal conceptual in that context?
I am not a perio-trained guy. I do based on the implant training, more on prosthetic driven and bone. So if Victor is asking about immediate denture over immediate overdenture over two implants, for instance, I know some groups, they have done studies on that. If you have implants, or if you have bone enough for 11.5 millimeter implant to be placed, I have seen studies with good results on the two implants being placed on the mandible to stabilize the lower denture. So immediate. I would go based upon those papers. I have done many, no, maybe one or two. The ones that I did, one lasts very long, very stable bone. The other one, I got some bone remodeling. Maybe 3 to 4 threads were gone.
So is that the minimal amount you're saying is like
11.5 millimeter length.
But two implants.
Two implants. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar. Actually, I don't have experience with a single implant on the mandible.
There's some evidence, I think, coming from Australia, doing one implant here in the middle area.
I have heard that. So I'm in favor is to have as many as possible, as we all know. Mm-hmm. I've been reading lots of paper. I've been also discussing some. There is a guy, David Noré, who is a Belgian guy who has an interesting observation and concept where he places as many implants as possible, and he's not using all-on-4s in the concept that all-on-4 might be. If he can place 6, he places. He can place 8, he places. Of course, it depends on the clinical scenario, but I see people placing much more. Now, two implants over denture, two implants, I'm in favor of two. I don't have experience on a single. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We actually had him here on the EAO Just Ask session. So if anyone is interested, I guess you can find it.
I didn't watch that one, and I will.
Yeah.
I saw Guto Giordani. I saw some other guys just to get a glance on the Just Ask.
Yeah, so, it was a nice one.
So on the single, I don't have experience on that.
Yeah. I have a little bit of a practical question, also more like a surgeon's questions, but obviously that's what my question is. So you have your full denture now, finalized, everything perfect. Now you're going for surgery, and maybe this is a case where you don't want to go for immediate loading, what case soever. I mean, it could be, right? Bone is very soft, or implants are too short. This can be really a pain, right? A full denture after surgery, like maybe having bone augmentation underneath, maybe having soft tissue underneath, and you have swelling, it goes down, it goes up again. How do you manage that? You have any tips and tricks for me? Because this makes me crazy. I mean, these 2, 3, 4 weeks you really have there.
Well, the way to do it is more on the software side. So now we can make some predictions on how much bone you will augment. And again, I go back to the 3D printing. So if you have a denture, and then you can make some calculations on at least approximate how much bone you're going to augment. So you just change on the software, very simple, the design you have, or you can scan that denture and then redo a new design, create a little more space, and then you 3D print. Why I'm saying that? Because before, again, it goes for the financial standpoint. So you can 3D print things 2 times, 3 times. So because it fits on the budget. Everybody who is placing 6, 8 implants can afford 2 to 3 dentures being printed. If you're doing bone augmentation, implant placement, and so on. So I would, there is ways that you can make some estimate on how much you would really get, bone and augment on the ridge. And then what you do is you do an oversized denture. And again, you reline it. Maybe that's what you have done. This is not something that, you don't need to be anybody is too smart for that. Yeah. But it's possible on the software that you can easily oversize things a little bit, and then you can have the denture for the patient after, grafting and so on.
It's a good point. So
yeah.
already,
again,
calculate that in the software.
You can easily do it. You can. There is ways. I see people doing a little more crazy. They create stents for the amount that you're gonna augment. So you augment, and then you have the stent that creates you. Okay, now it's a good shape. So the stent has the same dimension of the denture. So then you, like in the same way you do for extracting, when you do an immediate denture for extracted, as you mentioned in the beginning, same thing. You have that stent that goes inside. But now, when you have an existing denture, then you can have the inner of that existing denture and create a stent just for you that you can do your augment, and then you go in back and, okay, now it works. So different ways that people is approaching that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
No, helps totally. I think it's a very, very valid point, and it's a very, very good flow. If there are any more questions, feel happy. I mean, we have Nelson here; he's a true expert in that field, so asking questions. Otherwise, if you don't ask questions, I want to ask questions. Nelson, I have one more question for you, which is a little maybe off topic, but as you are here, I want to ask you. In these full arch cases, if you go for the final restoration, you sometimes have the problem that all teeth are gone, the perception for the patient is maybe a little difficult with the full implant situation, and you see chipping. That's at least what I see in these big cases. Maybe also a occlusal problem, whatever, but you see chipping. Is there a tendency that you go for monolithic restoration in this context to overcome that? However, then have this very hard material which you have maybe on both sides of the jaws. You get my point? You have any considerations about that?
Yeah, it depends on the philosophy of work. So of course, if you have a hybrid, monolithic, solid, and the hybrid breaks, not chips, it breaks. You have the file, it's easier to redo it. I'm not saying that from the financial standpoint, it's quite expensive to redo it. But anyways, the file is there, you can repeat it. So I think that's safe. However, what I have seen, at least it's my observation, and I didn't go through the literature for that answer, is fully monolithic against fully monolithic zirconia, the patient, they tend to tap, and that is a loud sound. Yeah. So what I have done, I have make a little hybrid approach. So I would do a fully monolithic on the top, and I would do a PMMA pressed over, a metal on the lower.
You see
I
any
think
chipping there on the PMMA?
It happens more often. So now you can design things different now, which you can have the design of the bar in a such a way that when it chips, you just have the PMMA milled out and you glue it on top. So this is maybe the easiest way that you can rescue the patient, because that's how I call it. I need to rescue this patient. So one case that I have done, I designed, I mean, I could have shown this too. So I designed the bar in a way that I glue a PMMA milled on top of the bar. Of course, all of this depends on the height that you have available. All of this depends on the room that we have for work for. So, and it works in this way. If you see this printing coming now, pushing some of these processes, I think that may change completely the way that we all see it. Because on the printing side, and again, if the patient chips, if the patient breaks something, it's a sign that this patient has a parafunction. So he might be a bruxist and he needs, I know, night guards are important, but not all of them, they wear night guards. So meaning I would go for a more cautious approach and having, instead of two zirconia monolithic one against another, and having a little softer material in one end that can compensate, because if he breaks, at least he breaks something that will not be the implant or the screw or some other things, which is easier to be replaced. So I would go for more a hybrid approach.
Perfect.
I don't know if that helps.
No, it helps a lot. Nelson, we have a question of our friend Jose Navarro. Hello to Jose. Also a good soccer team. I mean, we have the Brazilians here now, the Spanish or German. A lot more here. Wow. Jose has a question. How long does it take you to plan it? I mean, what is the time schedule, and how long does it take to print it, and what are the approximate costs in material? He wants to know.
Yeah, well, time-wise, let me put my environment here, okay? Which I have already calculated minutes on how much it takes for me for a patient to have a denture, considering a edentulous patient that a denture fabricated. So the patient comes, the first consultation is the longest, because I need to go for the vertical dimension. I need to do some of this. So that takes a little bit. Plus, I need, consider the patient has a denture, I need to realign it. So that consultation itself takes me 2 hours. The reason is I need to scan the denture and maybe give the denture back to the patient. So the patient goes someplace else for a coffee, for instance. So then I sit and I design a pair of denture. So for me now, it takes 1 hour and 40 minutes. I'm not the fastest one to design a pair of denture, considering that I have a good reference from the first denture. So considering that, so then I go for the printing and the milling. So the printing time, it depends. So the printer that I have, it speeds up the whole process. It's a sprint rate printer. So they have platforms, and there is a heat platform. So it goes in some of these cases because it positions the base, especially the base, on an upright position, or more a little inclined, some 65 degrees on the inclination. That takes longer, in 100 microns. So we can go for 1.5 hours for the base. And if you have another printer, you can print the teeth, with much less time. So having said that, so it takes pretty much 6 hours to have something nicely done, or even more, 7 hours. So that's why now one way that people is approaching is sending design to be designed someplace else, and then you have in 48 hours a design of the denture, and then you can print in-house. So it's a time-consuming process. It's not that simple to do what I'm saying to everybody here. It's a learning curve. It takes time. So the first consultation takes time. But what is the most important is you reduce the number of consultations. So can you do it in a single day? Yes, you can. I'm not advocating it. You can do it in a single day. Sure, you can. But you know what? You can do it in 2 sessions or 3. If you have a try-in, 3. If you don't have a try-in, 2 sessions, which I don't believe works because patient needs to have a try-in. Dentistry needs a try-in. So you needed 3 consultations, 3 days that the patient would come to develop it. So the bottleneck is the design. Design takes long. That's the bottleneck, because you need the knowledge on occlusion, you need the knowledge on the software design, and you need the knowledge on how the pictures you have will integrate to what you are proposing and design. That's where the bottleneck is. So if you design like in a sloppy way, so you're gonna need at least 2 other visits for trying. But if you're a good designer, so it's gonna take a little bit and then it takes long. So it reduces the number of visits big time, and it's possible to do in a single day. It's possible to do in a single day. In fact, there is some companies that come out of the US. Some of them, they have a denture in a day. That's how they advertise it. In fact, it's not in a day. It's a 24 hours, right? So you come 8 in the morning in one day, and the next day, 8 in the morning, you have a denture fabricated. Because, yeah, you have the design, and you have the printing time, post-processing, so on. So, but from the financial standpoint, he asked, it's much cheaper. The difference price-wise, when you 3D print, is very cheap. And depends where you are. And of course, depends on the materials available. For instance, Jose is in London. In Brazil, we don't have all the materials, for instance, that the United States has, maybe not the one that it has in London. So that makes also a big difference, because the combination of software, the parameters in the software for the printer, and also the resin that is validated for that printer makes a big, huge difference on the overall outcome. So that's why you cannot use everything and print in any printer. You need to have a specific material for a specific printer and a validated. That's how I call it. So the product must be validated, and the software must be integrated in a way that the flow makes the process optimized. Jose, I don't know if I have answered, but it's a very fast process, but it reduces the number of visits.
I think it did perfectly. Nelson, I think we're at the end of the show. It just went like this. It was amazing. Thank you very much. It was a great honor for me to have you. Thanks to all our colleagues all around the world for participating. If you have more interests in things from the EAO, please look into the bottom. There are more things to do. Berlin is still online. Please log into the Berlin Congress, which was amazing. And please log in back into the next Just Live. It's going to be on the 4th of December. It's also about full arch cases. Nelson, maybe you also log in also. And with this, I would like to thank you all. Thank you, Nelson. And see you back in December or at any of the congresses. Thank you very much, and greetings all around the world.
Thank you all.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you very much.